Hello and welcome back. Today I want to give just a little bit of an update on my Palace of Versailles project. Now, since I've reached 100 subscribers, I am going to work on a project that I'll debut shortly to commemorate that. Most likely a building that's now 100 years old. I'm thinking of the Ritz Tower in Manhattan. But for the time being, I want to show off what I've been doing, a lot of it kind of mundane work around Versailles, but still I want to make sure I had that logged. So here we have the front facade. A lot of this has been seen already in my previous videos. I have made sure to finish the attics in the central part of the palace, and you can see that the roofs are mostly finished. I am still leaving the Hall of Mirrors to be the last thing that I do for this project, as a little bit of a treat to myself, and also to keep myself motivated, because I feel like once I do the Hall of Mirrors, I'm going to kind of table whatever I haven't finished with the rest of the project. Now, part of what made this project a huge undertaking was that I wanted to do, on more or less a one-to-one scale, the gardens and park of Versailles. Now here, as we're flying over, you can see the bosquets and a lot of different water features, some of which I'm still working on. I am going to put some statues, by which I mostly mean mobs that through commands are not moving. I'll make sure that I do that in time, probably all at the same time. I'll just go from fountain to fountain. But what I have done lately are planting a lot of trees and also preparing a lot of meadows. Here you can see one very large area that all I really had to do was apply bone meal to the grass, and then I used commands to fill any of the tall grass with air so that it doesn't look too wild. It looks like a meadow that's reasonably kept under control. And a lot of this I used Google Maps as a resource for. There also were some old plans of the Versailles Park that I was able to pull, and I'll make sure to include those also in this video. Some of the pathways, they've changed over the past few centuries, so I can't really pin this down at any specific year, because I also wanted to make sure I had things like the Petit Trianon, but also the Menagerie. But I also wanted to make sure that I had the Gallery of Battles within the palace proper. And those things did not all exist at the same time. So I had to make a few artistic adjustments. But here we have the pathway that leads up to the Trianon. Another adjustment I had to make is that the Trianon, both the Grand Trianon and the Petit Trianon, are at right angles rather than the non-right angles that they are in real life. That's most evident here with the Garden of the Petit Trianon. I had to rotate it about 45 degrees. That's because I did not want to build this on an angle. I know it's going to affect the rest of the grounds. Here you can see the theater that I'm working on, the Queen's Theater. But ultimately, I'd rather have things built on straight lines and not try to fudge things at angles rather than trying to keep it perfectly accurate. And I've still been able to do a lot of what's there in real life, including this. These are the gardens of the Grand Trianon. This actually took me quite a while. I didn't think it was going to, but laying out the paths, planting all the trees, putting in the hedges, this took me a lot longer than some of the other sections of the park. Ultimately, though, I'm very pleased with it, and I will eventually, probably when I release a full video of the completed project at some point in the future, I'll have nice walkthroughs of some of these paths. See, we also have some fields. That's another thing that's changed over time. Some areas at one point have been fields to actually grow crops. Other times they haven't been. Uh, Things have changed a lot with the Parc of Versailles since it was first laid out. I have a combination of handmade trees. Here you can see some that line this one avenue. And then other times I made sure to force tall oak trees. And then I copied and pasted whole sections of pathways just going down the line. And other times I just planted the saplings and let happen what would happen. You can see that mostly in the areas in between the paths. But every once in a while, I did make sure to have force tall oak trees here and there in the middle of the meadows. I also made sure to include the Rue de Galie, which is a stream that runs through the park. Now, my stream here actually runs in the opposite direction of the real life one, just because of how the topography came out for this project. I didn't want to concern myself too much with the real life topography of the park because we're dealing with such large areas that having the actual water level of the Grand Canal and then having the higher areas surrounding it would be too dramatic. It would be too much work, especially for something that probably wouldn't really be noticed. And it just ended up that when I put this river in, it flows in the opposite direction of the real life one. If you watched the 2024 Paris Olympics, you may recognize this part of the park where they had erected a whole grandstand for several different events. Of course, the equestrian events were all over the place at the Versailles Park, but they even had some swimming events. They had a pool built beneath the grandstand here. And this lawn leads down to the edge of the Grand Canal. It's a large cross shaped body of water that is right in the middle of the park. And you can see that for the lawn, I tried to make it look a little bit more realistic, having little bits of, well, short grass, but grass, wildflowers, some leaf litter here and there, just so it doesn't look too flat and green. I didn't want it to look like turf. I wanted it to look like an actual lawn. And the same thing with the trees. I made sure to use different leaves so that the colors would complement each other. And here, moving on to the south side of the Grand Canal, we come across some pathways that actually don't exist anymore, but I saw them on an old map, so I decided to recreate them just to add a little bit of diversity and not have it be solid masses of forests or open meadows. You can also see, because I did not do this in super flat, how the biomes change the foliage color over these areas that I just bulldozed to build the park. Now, coming here to the southern edge of the park, we have La Lanterne, which is a retreat for the President of France. It was originally built in the 1780s as a hunting lodge. This is the most recent aspect I've been working on, and you can see it's not quite finished. It was right behind the menagerie. The menagerie doesn't exist anymore. It was torn down a long time ago, but there were a lot of exotic animals, and some consider it to be the first zoo because there was a conscious effort to actually have separate pens with the animals separated out in them. And originally I was not going to build it, but once I started reading up on the history, its place in the history of France and its scientific place in history that I thought, you know what, I want to build this. And also, I didn't have anything else that I was going to do on the southern edge of the Grand Canal. So this way, it complements the Trianon, which is on the north edge of the Grand Canal. Now over here, we have an open field that I'm going to have to make sure to fill in. And here you can see that with the absence of any grass or flowers, it does look a little bare. It looks a little, gives you a little bit of existential dread, really. It looks a little liminal. And then we have some other areas where I filled in trees already. This is going back in the direction towards the palace. We're going to the eastern edge of the Grand Canal, where there was an area called Petite Venice. There were a number of gondolas actually gifted to the French king by Venice, and they were stored over here in some barns, and they would often put the gondolas out onto the water. And actually, that was one of the favorite ways of Louis XIV going to the menagerie. It was taking a gondola or some kind of boat on the Grand Canal. Going back south a little bit, you can see I still have some areas to fill in, and also some trees that I want to rework a little bit. And we get back to the bosquets, which are directly west of the palace. And you can also see the road that I have running on the southern edge of the palace grounds. Of the bosquets that are to the west of the palace, I've completed most of them. There are a couple that I still have to do. We're coming up now on one that I still have to fill in. I haven't quite decided what I want to do because this bosquet has been a couple of different things at a couple of different points in history. At one point, there was a hedge maze. So I'm still deciding exactly what I want it to look like. And that's directly to the west of the Orangerie, which was a large area that received a lot of direct sunlight, and there were fruit trees growing there. Fruit trees that were in large pots that could actually be moved inside during the cold months, along with fires running to keep them warm. It was really a technological marvel and something I just had to add to the palace. And then to the south of the Orangerie is the Lake of the Swiss Guard. This was one of the first areas of the grounds that I actually worked on. This was before I was working all the way around the Grand Canal. And it was a little bit of a primer for how do I want to do the Grand Canal? How deep do I want it to be? I decided after doing this that I wanted the floor, the bed of the water features to be mud, and also for them not to be too deep, because as in real life, they're really not all that deep. They're man-made bodies of water that are somewhat well controlled and designed to not be very deep. And also growing trees around this part of the park, it was a little bit of an experience because I wanted the oak trees to be tall and trying to force them to be tall and making my way around. I ultimately decided copy and paste is probably my best friend. And here we have an equestrian statue. This marks the southern edge of my palace. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I'll make sure to post more updates in the future, and check out some of my other videos. I also hope that you enjoyed the improved sound quality, again, here on my new microphone that my wife gave me for Christmas. I'm very happy with it and excited to use it more in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you at the next one. Bye.